Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining part 2 of this weekly Q&A. If you missed part 1, which contained all the NFL related questions, after watching this one, of course, then you can go check out that one, okay, brother. And if you don't, you can go and out of this shirt. I don't know what the frick's got into me. Alright, let's go ahead and get started with this Q&A. Ow, that kind of hurt. Next time when you do that, you can pretend to do it, without actually, digging in all this. But if you're going to do it, you go nuts. Stephen Hilton asks, with LeBron going to his 8th straight NBA Finals, will he still leave Cleveland? This was a topic in a video I was going to touch on very, very soon. But then, of course, he decided to make his 8th straight NBA Finals. So for the time being, I will punt that puppy down the road a little bit. It's an interesting question. There are lots of options. And Cleveland, I think, is still one of them, yes. Lawrence Grani asks, what does LeBron have to do to pass MJ as the GOAT? In my mind, still quite a bit. But, topic for another video that I will touch on this channel in the future. Peter Jedra asks, lots of talk about LeBron is going to Los Angeles. Who's the reliable source? What's the reliable source for this? You were hearing the same things 8 years ago about him going to Miami. It started out as sources, rumors, and reports, and ended up being 100% true. Him, Wade, and Bosch were all going to be down there. So there's some smoke there. There may be some fire there. I really wonder, though, if he would really want to go to the Lakers playing on Kobe's old team. Not to mention the fact he'd have to deal with the LeVar Ball bullshit. Would he really want to do that? It's one thing if you're in Cleveland where you could be the unquestioned king. You go down to Miami, and yes, you joined Dwayne Wade's franchise. That is absolutely true. But we're not talking about the Lakers with their history, their prestige, and the great players that have played there over the years. I think it's an option. It's a possibility. And they've got the money to make it happen. But I think we're penciling him in there just a little too quick, perhaps. Drake Maddox. What one player in the NBA would you choose to build around? Ben Simmons, Jason Tatum, Kristaps Porzingis, or the Greek Freak? It's crazy the Greek Freak's still only 24 years of age? Oh, man. Imagine what his upside and future looks like. Porzingis is too hurt at this point to be able to count on him to build your entire franchise around him. So you've got Jason Tatum and Ben Simmons. I think right now you have to go with Simmons. I think we would have to. When you talk about the position that he plays and the ability to make people better, hoping that he would develop a shot. He's still only 20 years of age. Right now you got to lean Simmons. Cody Martin. Can Trump win in 2020? Mind you said he couldn't in 2016. And can the GOP maintain a majority in Congress? I think the simple answer to both of those questions is yes, Cody. I don't know why you're so obsessed with this, why this is the only thing you ever ask me about or want to talk about, but hey, whatever. I understand. Can Trump win in 2020? Absolutely he can. He won it once. He doesn't have to win the popular vote. He didn't win the popular vote the first time. He still won in the states that he needed to, in the states that mattered. And when it comes down to a presidential election, while you will have people that even voted for him probably the first time are now dismayed by some of his behaviors and his actions and so forth, people very much still vote based off of their pocketbook and based off of security. And we can't really use school shootings as a major impetus for change because you've been having school shootings for years and mass shootings for years and ain't shit happened about them. So that really doesn't factor into the security conversation. It's more about international security and the economy. And people ultimately vote with their pocketbooks. And if by the time 2020 comes around and you get to election time, and especially with the Democrats and their complete and total lack of ability to come up with any type of coherent, consistent message, Trump can go and say, hey, if you're in a good place, you can stay in that good place for another 4 years by voting for me. If you're not, then vote for the other guy. But if enough people are saying, hey, it could be better, but it could be a lot worse, they might not be so quick to radically change the path and the direction of the country. So he can absolutely win. He absolutely can win. And I think to dismiss him and just automatically assume he's going to lose is folly, just like it was in 2016, frankly. He is the incumbent. He will have a built-in advantage. And when you look at the Democratic side, there is not at this moment that one clear-cut, unanimous type of galvanizing type of candidate. There are not even like two primary candidates that you could sit there and say automatically, well, it's got to be the guy. The Democrats have about a year and a half to figure this shit out before you still really start getting into the primary season, and they've got to start finding some candidates, Cody. And they've got, you know, all these old names like the Bernie Sanders, the Elizabeth Warrens, the Joe Bidens, or do they go in a younger direction like Kamala, Cory Booker, maybe a Klobuchar, who even, yes, in her late 50s, early 60s would be a younger option. They got to find out a lot. And based off of the general incompetence of the Democratic Party, I wouldn't feel that badly about Trump's chances of winning in 2020. I think it would be more so about if he would actually want to run in 2020. As far as can the GOP maintain a majority in Congress, when you look at the congressional map for 2018, the Senate races that are up at stake, to get a true majority, what is it now, 51-49, the Democrats would have to win 2 seats they don't currently have. And when you look at the map and you look at the math, where do those 2 seats come from? Assuming they would hold every single other seat. So the GOP has a built-in advantage there. It could end up the 50-50 split, but the math is favorable in the Senate. I don't know if it's as favorable in the House. That's where the GOP, I think, could be in a little bit more trouble, potentially. But again, if the economy is not in a horrible shape, people might not be as quick to change. And the Democrats have to move a lot of seats. Like, they could potentially narrow that majority. They could still end up with the majority in the House, but it's going to take a lot. And again, it's about messaging combined with, if you had a really bad result and a bad looking result in terms of optics from the Russia investigation with Mueller, and you had maybe something go wrong economically or something along those lines, or Trump made a really bad snafu, different than other snafus he's had, then perhaps the Democrats have something to latch onto. But they've still got to come up with their own coherent, consistent message, and I don't trust them to be able to do so. So right now it's still advantage GOP. That blue wave is more like a ripple right now. Keys 10, David Robinson or Shaquille O'Neal? Shaq. Shaq all day. And also, why didn't African Americans ever receive reparations from slavery? Man, we're just going all in on this one. Here's the thing. If you go down the reparations path with one group of people, then you've got the Native Americans, the descendants of the Cherokees, the Navajo, and everybody else, and they say, well, what the fuck? We were here first. We got slaughtered and our land stolen and forced onto freaking reservations. While they were enslaved, we were enslaved too and had even worse things happen. They at least still had a chance, while the white man in those times did the best they could to wipe out the African culture and people's identities, and they were killed and so forth and sold in trade. You know, the fact is there are far more descendants of those slaves than there are the Native Americans. Why? Because the Native Americans were more ritualistically slaughtered, and that's just the way it is. Also, when you talk about reparations, then when you go back, do you also sit there and try to go after other countries around the world that participated in the slave trade, that sold those slaves to American slaveholders, up to and including those countries in Africa? Do you go after reparations for them? It's a complex issue. To me, it's one of those things, even if you sat there and you gave reparations in the form of monetary benefits and so forth to descendants of slaves, what does that do to uplift a people long term? To me, and again, speaking as a white guy, you take it whatever you want it, the better form of reparation is to make sure that schools in the inner cities are on a level and equal playing field to those in the suburbs. It's to ensure the safety of all of our children throughout this country, whether they live in big cities or in small towns in rural America. To me, it's about providing equal opportunity for everybody. It's about making sure that young black men aren't getting death sentences from cops solely because they are young black men. Those, to me, are the more important reparations that we could do going forward to make things better. Because even if we sat there and wrote out some type of I'm sorry check that said, hey, here's $5,000 for everybody. That's going to create a whole shit storm, and it's going to create a whole windfall. Then you're going to have other people looking for it. It just creates bigger problems. And even then, that check doesn't mean anything in the grand scheme of things because it's not doing anything to better the situation now and in the future. The real reparations to do are to make the playing field more level and equal across the board for everybody and provide everybody those opportunities and chances fairly going forward. That's the real reparation that should happen. It's not, but it should. Just handing out money and saying, oh, we're sorry, or handing out property doesn't really solve the issue. Jeff's Ego, thoughts on Danica Patrick? It was perfectly fitting that her last race at Indy yesterday ended in a crash. God, I got to talk to my mom. I'm sure she would absolutely love that. She says every time she watched Danica, she was always in the damn wall. Or as Bonnie used to say, and still does. Danica loves a big stiff wall in her front end, and she likes a stiff dick in the back end. Her preference would be at the same time. Anyways, but moving on. But all seriousness, Danica was big for the sport, brought exposure to it. She wasn't a great driver. Just call it as we see it. Favorite Cubs player growing up? It was Andre Dawson, and then it became Sammy Sosa later on. But I was always a huge fan of the Hawk. I used to imitate the batting stance and everything. It was the Hawk. Kyle Garner. How surprised were you with Victor Oladipo's improvement after the trade to Indianapolis? Quite a bit, because I always thought he was maybe more like a 16 to 18 point per game guy, and he goes to Indiana and he becomes a freaking all-star. Just shows you that Russell Westbrook doesn't make people better. But yeah, great to see it. And now Indiana looks at it and they're like, hey, we've really got something here with this Oladipo kid. Frederick Lohaus. Why does ESPN push a leftist bias more than sports? I don't know if they push a leftist bias more than sports. I think that's kind of a bullshit premise of the question. Do they have a leftist bias, a kind of a liberal bias, and do they push that to a certain degree? They absolutely do. I feel like that is a more appropriate statement to make. Let's be honest when you talk about ESPN. Outside of the games and the leagues that they buy into in terms of their television deals, what else do you really tune into SportsCenter for? Their commentary shows are mostly trash, and not just because of political leanings, just because they're trash. And when was the last time you can really truly remember sitting down and watching an entire SportsCenter from beginning to end? For me, it has been years and years. So they were trying to expand themselves, figuring controversy creates cash, and looking at some of the things with people like Skip Bayless and Stephen A. Smith, not from a political standpoint, but more so from a stirring up things and making things kind of scandalous and controversial. It was very good for them in that sense, so they figured maybe it would go leaning that way. They could be counterculture, and to me it really didn't work. But that's on them. Scott Ford, could LeBron join the Toon Squad and beat the Monstars? No! He couldn't beat him if they took Dwight Howard's powers! Especially if Dwight Howard's powers were stolen by an alien and they started making hybrid alien bastard babies! No! No, no, no! Vols fan, does Barry Bonds deserve to be in the Baseball Hall of Fame? Yes. They can induct Bud fucking Selig, who basically green-lighted steroids and he knows he damn good and well did, than a guy like Barry Bonds, who if you want to just sit there and say, okay, starting in 98 or 99 is when he was truly juicing, because you can see the physical transformation and the change and so forth. You still have 86 to 97, 98. Based off of that stretch of 12, 13 seasons, is he a Hall of Famer? Yes, and he's a first ballot guy. If Selig's in, then Barry Bonds should already be in, period. Jackie Rader, why isn't Mark Aguirre in the Basketball Hall of Fame? Not good enough. Not everybody can be in. And even when you go in the future, some of these guys are going to get in because of numbers, and they shouldn't be in just because of their numbers. Aguirre was a good player. You know, obviously he had his time in Dallas where he was really good. I don't think he was good enough to be a Hall of Famer. I don't think of him as a Hall of Famer. The Urkinator asks, fuck, marry, kill. Danica Patrick, Cheryl Swoops, Maria Sharapova. Cheryl Swoops isn't going to marry me because she all of a sudden magically discovers she's a lesbian. But I would still fuck her, especially with the premise of potentially getting a threesome on with another lady. So that's the fuck. The marry is Maria Sharapova. I'm good on Danica Patrick. She can die. Junior, what's it going to take for an NBA team to stop overpaying role players? Well, isn't part of the problem that they're required to spend like 90% of the cap every year? So they've got all this money. Eventually they've got to spend it on somebody. So that would probably need to change. But yeah, it's a bad problem. Like I look at the Rockets. They're paying, Ryan Anderson $20 million a year to not play in the Western Conference Finals? Matchups my ass. You're paying the dude a fifth of your total salary cap space, and he's not seeing the floor. That's ridiculous. That's got to change. There's got to be some type of hierarchy of just because you make it to a certain point doesn't automatically mean you get to get paid the most. It should be, like I look at it this way. Like the superstars, the LeBron James, the Currys, the Durants, the James Hardens, a couple other guys, Anthony Davis, so forth. They deserve the supermax money, the 40+ million a year, and that shouldn't even have to count against the team's salary cap. Like that should just be they are that level of player. Everybody agrees you pay them that much. Then you should have stars / all-stars. You should have very good players, somewhat okay players, fringe players, end-of-the-bench guys. You should not have end-of-the-bench guys getting paid like mid-level starters. That's not a good look for the players either. Because if you're LeBron James getting ready to go get a big contract, and you're like, I'm about to get 40+ million a year, but a scrub like Chandler Parsons, let's say, could get 24 million a year. That's ridiculous. I'm worth 10 times what he is. Why am I getting paid less than half of what he is? Or less than twice of what he is? And I think it's a fair question. So everybody needs to do something to stop that shit because it gets ridiculous. Jess, leading candidates for the 2020 election. I'm assuming Trump's going to face some type of primary challenger. I think Jeff Flake is a possibility. I think the more realistic possibility in terms of being some type of viable competition for him would be John Kasich. In terms of the Democratic side, I'm pretty sure Bernie's going to run again. I think Biden's going to throw his hat into the ring. I'm not sure Elizabeth Warren will. She could, but I'm not 100% sure. I think both Kamala and Cory Booker will throw their hats into the ring. I think in terms of the leading candidates on the Democratic side, it's going to be Kamala, Cory Booker, and then one of the white guys. One of the white guys. The real leading candidate, if she decided to run, would be Oprah in its game set match for the Democratic side. That's the option. You meet star power with star power. Those would be your leading candidates right now. Matt Mox Mini, who is the biggest mark for themselves in the NBA? God love him. It's LeBron James. Closely followed by Russell Westbrook, padding his stats and all that other crap. But LeBron James posted on social media, talking about it in interviews, talking about his legacy and how great this is and how fantastic that accomplishment is. God damn it, you know what? If I'm LeBron James, I'm doing the same damn thing too. It doesn't mean he's not a raging freaking mark for himself. For God's sakes, the name he gave up for himself, really, honestly, was King James. He's a massive mark for himself, and it's okay. When you do what LeBron James can do, it is okay to be a massive mark for yourself, just like Jordan was, is, and always will be a massive mark for himself. That is not an insult. It is okay. It is okay. But LeBron is clearly the biggest mark in the league for himself. Dave Garcia, who's a bigger moron, Colin Cowherd or Nick Wright? I hesitate to say true moron because Colin Cowherd says idiotic, factless, stupid things all the time and has quite a big following. So I don't know if that's moronic. Nick Wright somehow, with any real discernible talent, has somehow become somebody that people actually listen to. I think because of his relentless pushing of the LeBron is the GOAT propaganda and not really providing proper context to anything he says about that, it's Nick Wright. Kevin Sheridan, who are the Browns of the NBA? Is it anybody other than the Sacramento Kings currently? The real easy answer from a historical standpoint would be the Clippers, but the Clippers have enjoyed some playoff appearances in recent years. The Kings, it's been quite a while since they really mattered at all, so it has to be them. 32J Locke, should the NBA MVP include the playoff performances or just stay as a regular season reward? It should just stay as a regular season award. You know, ultimately you have an MVP award given out during the playoffs. Granted, it is in the NBA Finals, but that is that. The regular season MVP is the regular season MVP. The MVP should stay a regular season reward. And then RG Knee's comeback. What sports teams do you think were ruined most by egos? Ruined most by egos. I would probably say that 2000 Blazers team that was up like 15 points in the fourth quarter to the Lakers would be one, because you just had so many names and so many egos. I also look at the Lakers of Shaq and Kobe. They won 3 straight championships, but then you got to a point where Shaq still wanted to stubbornly be the guy, and now Kobe stubbornly wanted to be the guy, and they really ruined a golden opportunity to go down as one of the truly great dynasties of all time. So from an NBA standpoint, I think of them, and I think of egos and teams being ruined, and I looked at them as a perfect example of that. A perfect example of that. There have been other teams throughout, but those are the ones I come up with the quickest. So that's it for this Q&A. Thanks again for all of your questions. This was fun. I enjoyed it. Hope you enjoyed watching it. Hope you liked your answers if you asked the questions. I'll see you guys later. There's more videos coming up, so stay tuned.